What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? NoZoupForYou here, and we've got a little more news. We are getting ready to lose a fair amount of ships. 8 in total will be leaving when update 0.10.5 hits. Now, don't get too alarmed because that's still several months out. I think it's about 2 months away right now. We're just at 0.10.3, but you do want to know this because if there are some ships on your radar, no pun intended, you're going to want to get them or at least save up or get what you got to get them before they do disappear in a couple months. Now, these aren't going to be any ships that are too special. Well, actually, I take that back. There are some really special ships here that you're probably going to want. What I mean is, I guess there's not going to be really high-tier ships involved with this. There's a lot of tier 6s and 7s and a few 8s. So I'm just going to kind of walk through, tell you what they are, and kind of tell you what my opinions of these ships are and whether or not you're going to want to focus on getting these ships before they go. So we're going to start with Tier 6 Erich Lodenhart, and this is an aircraft carrier, a German aircraft carrier. This really comes down to whether or not you like CVs, and I'm not really a fan of Tier 6 CVs. I don't see them as something that I would spend resources towards if there are a lot of other ships out there, which there are. So if you're a CV main and you gotta have them all, then I guess this one's for you, but for me it's not. So moving on, Tier 6 Admiral Graf Spee, another German ship. This cruiser is actually not that bad. It does pack a punch under the right circumstances. You've got some nice torps with nice arcs. But out of the list of ships that we see here, I don't think this would be one of my priorities because there's several other ships on here that are priorities, in my opinion, like this next ship, which is the Tier 6 T-61. T-61 is a German destroyer, and it's probably one of the better, if not best, low tier, 6 is kind of low tier, mid-tier destroyers in the game. T-61 has an insanely fast torpedo reload at right around 60 seconds. She's got hydro, she's got all the stuff that you want in a destroyer in a nice little tidy German engineered package. I highly recommend going for this one if you don't have it already, especially if you're a DD main. T-61's just a lot of fun to play. It's very strong. It's a very good ship. So I would highly recommend putting that on your radar. If you don't have it already, I would get that one. Moving on to Tier 7, we've got the Z39. I'm not big on the Z39. If it came down to that or the T-61, it's hands down the T-61. I probably wouldn't even think about touching the Z39 out of these ships. That's just me personally though, so yeah, not even worry about that. The next 4 ships I'm going to cover are all strong and all really worth possessing if you don't have them, starting with the Tier 7 Nelson. Nelson's just a really fun battleship. It's a strong battleship. It's got some really good HE. It's kind of like a mini Conqueror in some ways. It does have some unique aspects to it in its heel, and you're limited in repairs, but aside from that, she's a fun ship. She's a good ship. She's the only British ship on this list. I would go after her if you like Tier 7 battleships or just Tier 7 in general. Not a bad choice right there. Moving on, we've got the Tier 7 Haida, and that is another decent destroyer. The Tier 7 Haida is kind of on the middle of the list here. I wouldn't rush to get it if you don't have ships like the T-61 or the Nelson or the other ones I'm going to mention. However, it's not a bad destroyer at all. It's actually a pretty good destroyer, and I guess it really comes down to whether or not you like the European style destroyers. Haida, of course, pan-European, so that one's definitely worth a look at, but nowhere near as important to get that as this next one, which is the Tier 8 Asashio. And I'm kind of surprised that this ship has stayed available as long as it has. Just a really, really powerful destroyer. I will say it's feast or famine, though. I mean, you'll either have a really, really good round or a really, really bad round. There's not much in between. There just really isn't. When you can only sink or connect torpedoes to aircraft carriers or battleships, you're really dependent on matchmaking. And if you get around with no battleships or CVs, well, that kind of limits what you're going to be able to do. The guns work in a pinch, but I mean, they're not phenomenal. You do have 5.4 kilometer concealment, which is really, really good. I mean, this ship is just disgusting, and with the torpedo reload boost, I mean, it's the wall of skill. Everybody talks about the wall of skill. Well, this has the wall of skill, so really, really good destroyer. And then lastly, we've got the Tier 8 Lenin, which is a Russian battleship. Lenin is pretty powerful. Lenin's a good ship. I've used Lenin in ranked gameplay. A lot of players has. It does decent. I mean, it's not the best battleship at Tier 8, and it's been kind of overshadowed by the other battleships out there. For what it's worth, though, I think this falls in the middle of the pack on the ships that I would get. Seeing it go isn't that big of a loss. I mean, battleships are dime a dozen at this point, and this one really doesn't offer too much over any of the other battleship offerings out there. So, out of these 8 ships, the 3 that I would probably go for first, in no particular order, the Asashio, the Nelson, and the T-61. I know this is a very, very destroyer-heavy selection of ships, but the T-61 being one of the best destroyers, along with Asashio being one of the most, in certain circumstances, OP destroyers. Yeah, I would go for those 2 and the Nelson. Nelson just because it's a fun battleship. It really is. So those are your top tier 3 picks right there. And then after that, I would say you've got the Lenin and the Haida. Those are the tiers. That's what I would go for after those. You already have those. And then the bottom of the barrel on these, I would say, are going to be the Z39, the Lodenhart, and actually I might bump the Admiral Graf Spee up to the mid-tier for these. It's not worthy of being bottom of the barrel. So bottom of the barrel, I would say, would be Z39 and Eric Lodenhart. I just don't think rushing after those are really worth it. Definitely not something I would do. So yeah, make sure you get the T-61 or the Asashio before it goes. Those 2, I think, are the priority out of these. Again, you've got a few months to get that or them. They're not going anywhere anytime soon, but you know, a couple months does creep up on you. It does come sooner rather than later, and you don't want to wind up in a situation like many players wound up with some of the other ships in the past, running short of the resources they need to get them, or just forgetting about it, and they were gone. So those are the ships that are leaving. Can't say I'm surprised with some of them, especially Asashio and T-61. Very powerful destroyers. Very powerful destroyers and very fun. So, anyhow, take it easy. Hope you're doing great. I'll catch you all later. Zoop out.